There were a few times in the last year that I asked Ian whether he thought that we made the right decision to move here. 3 years in Canada. It feels like a lifetime since we moved here, and it also feels like we moved here yesterday. It's a very strange feeling. But what is very fun is that this is the month that we apply for our citizenship. Let's get straight into it. I was around this much pregnant when we first moved to Canada. When we first moved here, I was like 21, 22-ish weeks pregnant with Alba, and I'm currently 25 weeks pregnant. It's been really interesting for me to compare my pregnancy experience from now being here and being a bit more settled and just not busy moving countries. Let me share something about that. This pregnancy was planned to be in January, and yes, we can't always control that. It was like the minimum time set and all of that, but also I very strongly expressed my preference for having a baby in winter, particularly during the end of pregnancy, birthing, and the newborn part in the months when it is like super cold. And then once you're kind of through that like very nesting, very internal phase where you're actually just spending a whole lot of time at home, or at least the way that we do it, by the time you've kind of passed that, the weather is turning, spring is coming, you're ready to get out and you're ready to do things, and we can take like full advantage and do things and spend a lot of time outside in the summer. This is not something that I think I would have cared about in South Africa. This is maybe not something that I would have put a strong preference on, like birthing in a particular season or having a baby in a particular season. I don't think that it would have made such a difference to me. Where here, it feels like it makes a really big difference. A really big difference in terms of being able to use the short season that is the warm weather and use it to the fullest. And then also it sort of just feels very aligned to be doing those internal things in the cold months. This is not something I would have planned, and it wasn't a factor in it, but I think it does also help that this baby is due in January and Alba was born in February, so then you have babies that are the same season in terms of clothing. Again, I'm not sure I would have put such an emphasis on that back in South Africa, but here it's quite a big deal in terms of like the snowsuit and the shoes and all the things. So that's helpful, but that wasn't a main feature in the decision making there. Anyway, it worked out wonderfully. We are very grateful and we are very happy and we're very excited. So we will be expanding our family in January. Given that it's been 3 years now, I do find that we are getting better and better at living with the seasons, which feels very important to do here. We really did a good job of getting out this spring, summer, and now we're in fall. We're still getting out in fall, but we did find a way to spend a lot more time outside and a lot of time in nature. We started hiking, we call them nature walks, and we also do park run in Nose Hill every Saturday, which is awesome because that's something that's quite big in South Africa as well. So it feels very community orientated, and it's a nice way to start our weekend by getting up relatively early and getting outside. We also embraced the concept that summer here is like a busier time for outdoor things, and that some of the home-based stuff just kind of gets put on hold for those months, and they will get picked back up in winter, and it's not a big deal that they're not getting as much attention in those months because we need to prioritize being outside, enjoying the weather, enjoying nature and all of that, where I think initially we did not realize that importance, and then maybe trying to do the same things in the same seasons, whereas now it was like some kind of, okay, come sit here. Some stuff was just kind of like parked there and be like, we'll pick you back up when we're spending a lot more time indoors, or that thing is just not a super priority right now because we're gonna prioritize being outside. We're going into our 4th winter now, and I am very happy to say I feel much better equipped for going into winter this time. And what I mean by that is this might be our cheapest winter in terms of winter gear buying. Like every other winter thus far, we were still buying several supplies for winter. The first one obviously being the most supplies, like the car stuff and the shovels and the jackets and the things. The second winter, we needed to dress Elba for that, so it was all of Elba's stuff. And then we had started to develop our preferences. Yeah. So you're kind of finding like what works for you and what you want to get a different thing of and so forth. And then the third one was still a lot of buying because I think it was even stronger around preferences, and she was a toddler and I was figuring out like barefoot winter shoes. By the way, that video is on my channel because I did figure that out and I'm super happy with that. But, and then last year, you may recall if you watched that video, I invested in a traditional native maklaks, and I was like not sure at the time of filming whether that was going to work out, and they're pretty expensive, so it was like a chunk of money to invest in shoes. I'm super happy to report back that they did in fact work out, and they are my favorite winter item, and they made such a difference to my winter experience and my love of spending time outside in winter and feeling warm and feeling like I'm not compromising on my barefoot shoe values, and like my feet are comfortable, and it was just all around wonderful. So I'm so happy to report back that worked, because sometimes that stuff doesn't always work out, you know? Anyway, worth every cent that we spent on them. And I'm happy that this winter, it just feels like there's a lot less stuff that we need to buy or to do or to think about, because we know what we like. I know what the snowsuit I like for Elba. I actually bought it last year already. I thrifted it, so we didn't even buy a snowsuit for her this year. So all that we needed for her really was some more, like a bigger size winter shoe, which I ordered the same ones that I had made last year. I'm waiting on them. And then I'm making like a few more wool items. I'm gonna talk about my DIY wool stuff in this video and how that came about, because that came about from living here. But aside from that, it's just like add-ons. It's not like we majorly need to get anything for this winter, which feels awesome. All right, so that feels great, but let's talk about something that's not so wonderful. I miss the ocean. This year in particular, I've had a hard time with the fact that we are 3 years into living inland. This is something I did think would bug me when we moved here, like even before we moved here, but it's kind of really starting to hit me now. And we did go to Costa Rica last year. Like I said, we were going to go, and that was awesome, and that really helped fill up my cup of spending some time at the sea. But we still live in a place that is inland. And not just that, I thought that it would affect me most in winter, because then I'm of course seeing my family and friends back in South Africa, just like on the beach and doing all their summer stuff.
On a beach?
I know.
Where's Oma?
She might be on a beach, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I want to beach.
You want to go to the beach?
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. We have to go drive to the beach.
We gotta drive to the beach?
Yeah.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. I'm gonna have water.
Yeah, it's just a little bit far, that's all. So I thought it would impact me more in the colder months, but actually when it hit me the hardest was in spring and summer. And it was because I'm so used to spending my warmer months swimming in the ocean or some other natural body of water, where here...
I wasn't swimming yesterday.
We're going swimming on Wednesday.
I swam inside.
Yeah, we have to swim inside, yeah. In the indoor pool.
In the pool.
Yeah.
I said pool.
No, it's a bit cold, I'm sorry. So while being here this summer and spring, the natural bodies of water around us, the lakes, are very, 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 very cold. So not a fun time to swim in. So we a few times swam in the outdoor pool, and that was nice, but obviously I'm settling for a chlorinated outdoor pool where I am very used to living by the ocean, and I have my entire life. So this is my first time living inland, and I definitely found myself feeling like that was a real bummer this summer and this spring, and I was really craving that. trying to make the best of it. So on the nature walks, I took Elba a lot of times. There's a lot of nature around where we live. So a lot of times I would take her to where there's like a small little pond or a stream or something that she can definitely play in the water, but there was not a lot of swimming in that water. There's even jokes like amongst my friends that did these nature walks with us, how we picked ones that had like little streams or some kind of running water that I could listen to, because that would just at least fill up my cup and bring me that sense of being with nature and the water and all of that. So haven't quite figured out what to do with that. I just recognized that this year it was a real bummer for me. Now back to the wonderful, but also very real. Life has not been easy for us. I am somebody that I will take on whatever life throws at me, and I will do whatever that is within my control to make it wonderful and work on my attitude towards things, and definitely just take it in my stride and just accept that this is what life's throwing at us and do whatever I can to make life wonderful. In preparation for making this video, and also just life, reflecting on the last 3 years.
It's big.
Yeah, we faced some real challenges that had the potential to break us. We moved here when I was 5 months pregnant. We had a baby without any support, barely any friends, and all the friends we did have were very, very new friendships. We moved here without any idea of what we would do for income, because that was part of the way that we moved here and part of our visa structure. Also, we went from 2 fully working professionals to predominantly a single income household, obviously in our case by choice, with me staying home with Elba, but that would have been that way irrespective, at least for the first few months. So with our move here, I scaled down my business right before we had Elba in preparation for doing that, with the full intention to scale it back up and make some changes and all of that. So we had plans, I guess loose plans, because you also don't know how things are going to go. Ian had to come here, apply for a job. We don't know how long it would take him to get a job. We didn't know with parenting how long that would take, an adjustment, like how much it could work, not work, etc. A lot of that we were willing to just take in our stride. And we did. We took that in our stride. But what was also very difficult is that through our move here, Ian experienced a lot of health issues, in particular with his skin, and then he used cortisone to survive and to cope and adapt to a new job. For the last 2 years, he has needed to deal with and heal from the side effects of using that cortisone. So for the last 2 years, he has been healing from what is called TSW, topical steroid withdrawal, and then also heal from the initial skin things he took the steroids or the cortisone for. So I don't like to share too much on his behalf, but if I can just give an overview picture of what that meant for him, is that rather than coming here and living a life, he came here and a lot of his life was surviving. He was in extreme pain and discomfort for years, essentially, like a long time. And he had to adapt to a job and keep his job, because the way that we had decided to set up our family structure meant that he had that pressure to support his family. But then also what happened as a result of that is that I then took on a lot of the responsibilities in our home that I had not necessarily done before, or they were split between the two of us, where now I needed to be much more of a supportive role for him to be able to heal and maintain his job and still work full-time through everything. What happened as a result of that as well, obviously there's lots of things that have come as a result of that, is that I thought that I would be able to work more once we were through like the newborn phase and adjusting to parenting and all of that. But right as we kind of went out of that is when we majorly had to shift to support Ian to heal through everything that he was going through. And what that meant was that I could not really do much work because I needed to fulfill roles in our home I was previously not doing, and also there wasn't extra capacity for Ian to take over additional things to free up that time and energy for me to do that. A lot of our resources these last 2.5 years went into to ensure long-term sustainable healing, because there was more meds that were offered to him to deal with this, but then we were just concerned that we're just making things worse and like kicking the can down the road. So we fully embraced the healing journey that came with it, but it did mean that a lot of resources went into that. A lot of our time, a lot of our energy, and a lot of our money went into that. So what we pictured and sort of planned loosely, we didn't know how things were going to work out moving here and having a baby, but we kind of had some loose plans. Didn't work out the way that we thought, but also that's life. Sometimes life throws you some curveballs and some challenges, and that is literally just part of life. So I am super, super grateful that I can share that Ian is like 99% healed up. As you heard, it was a long journey to get here, to heal not just from the TSW, but also from the initial skin issues that he had. It was taking the cortisone for. So we are really, really incredibly grateful that he is no longer just surviving every single day, that he is no longer in constant pain and discomfort. And for several months now, he has been able to actually start living here. It sounds bad. It's not like you're not living when you're going through that, but you're definitely not embracing where you are when you're going through something like that. A few months ago, we started to be able to do more outdoor hikes and adventures as a family, and honestly it's just been so wonderful to be able to do everyday life like with our little family, which we didn't get to do for so long. So we have a lot of gratitude just for the everyday kind of stuff. Now, I also said that life threw challenges at us that had the potential to break us, and honestly like this did. It was really hard on everybody, but I'm also so grateful that we didn't just survive it. Like through everything, we stayed firm on building the best life for our family, given any set of circumstances that is being thrown at us. So now, having come out of that like hugely survival state, we are so much better off for it because we went through that, and because of, I think, a lot of the choices that we made in it, and a lot of our attitude towards like what was happening and what we needed to deal with. So I'm so grateful that our family feels so much stronger as a result of all of that. Our communication in our home feels like it's like so much more effective. We feel so much more like a team. Because of our very limited resources, time, energy, everything, we also built systems in our home and like routines and rhythms that really work for us. And now that we're not in that state, they're still very much serving us that maybe we wouldn't have done if we didn't go through all of that. I'm sharing this because it does feel like our adjustment here has maybe taken longer than I thought it would take because of, well, firstly, we became parents shortly after moving here, and then secondly, we dealt with this really big challenge for a long period of time as part of our move. It doesn't feel like, if someone were to ask like, oh, you know, how quickly did you adjust to living in a new country? It does feel like ours was maybe extended because of those factors. And at the same time, in saying that, so many beautiful things came from it. Like I mentioned a few things in our home and with our family, but another one that came from that is when Ian couldn't really do things with me, and I still wanted Alba to get out and I still wanted to do things, I leaned a lot onto friendships for that. And as a result, those friendships also feel a lot more connected and a lot stronger, which is amazing. Now, another part of this, because we're talking about all the elements and so much beautiful stuff came from it, but we also need to talk about the realities. So the reality is that from a financial perspective, I'm going to talk about money. I think that is really important to talk about that when you're talking about your move to a new country and like how your family's doing and all of that stuff. But I understand that that's not something that everybody likes to talk about. So just a heads up, that's what I'm going to talk about now. Now, as you heard, things didn't necessarily work out the way that we thought they would loosely. We didn't know how they were going to go anyway, but we definitely got thrown more challenges than we expected initially. So One of the big challenges was that we had an increase in our expenses to deal with the situation that we were dealing with. Expenses in general, and more expenses also when your resources like are a bit lower. So one of the things that we did in that time was order a lot of our groceries online just to help my energy, so I didn't like have so many different things to do, but obviously that comes at a slightly higher price tag. So there's like a few things like that that just kind of like increased our expenses. So how that kind of worked out was like we had a bunch of savings. We moved here. You spend like a lot of your savings on your move because you have to like buy everything from scratch and things are expensive. You're moving from rands to Canadian dollars, and then kind of felt like, okay, we're getting into the swing of things and building them back up despite our decision to be a predominantly income household. And then we got kind of knocked with this, which then again felt like we went from a saving building phase to a more spending phase. And also, of course, we became parents. So we had like the additional expense of parenting and the things that you want for your kid and you're doing with your kid and all of that that we did not have in South Africa. That's just a realistic picture of what was going on in our lives. And then also with the increase in expenses, I couldn't work as much as I initially was working or that we thought that I would be able to work. But now, for a while now, as we were coming out of this more like survivalish state, I could literally feel my productivity increase as my energy freed up again, because it naturally, as Ian started to get better, he stepped back into like roles that he previously fulfilled, and I wasn't acting in so much of a supportive role as much. Like a lot of my energy resources wasn't going into that. So just like naturally, I was feeling like I was having more energy. And if you watch my video from my 2 years ago video, I said that I was starting to get more energy because we'd adapted to being here and not everything was so new. So now it was like coming out of that, and then a few months later having the added thing of like Ian is starting to do better. Ian is starting to like take on again a lot of the things that he used to do, and it just kind of happened such that I was like, oh, I've got more energy. I've suddenly like, you know, picking up projects and things that I'm doing as a natural result of how that turned out. What's happened recently, it's like a little announcement that I get to share that I'm excited about, is that I decided to start a new venture in Canada. I have decided to start like a little business from scratch. It's very different from my consulting business that I still have in South Africa, so I still do that, but I do that when Elba's asleep, and now this will be something that is a little bit different from that. It also came as like a natural progression of just like everything that we were going through with life. So we are, if you've watched any of my videos or you know anything about me, we are very health conscious people. We are very like natural, and through our move here, I have sometimes struggled to get the things that I want for my family, like just be able to get it in general. But then if I was able to get it, often it came like at an incredibly steep price tag, or I couldn't like consistently get it. So from like quite early on in our move here, like I was sourcing things and trying to find it, and then I couldn't. So I started to make those things for our family. And the things that I'm making are very natural, very pure, like very simple. And I'm starting to get more energy and ready to take on like new challenges and things. And I felt like this is something worth sharing with other people who appreciate these types of products and, like me, are struggling to get them here in Canada. So that's where the idea was born. Now I'll still continue with my consulting business to South Africa. That's not stopping. The reality of that is that every hour I spend on that business takes me away from my family. It's stuff that I do away from Elba. And given we have chosen this life where she does not go to daycare, I am quite limited in the number of hours that I can put into my consulting. So I'm still doing that. But the reason I'm sharing that is I set up my consulting business in South Africa and I ran it very successfully for several years before we moved here and before I scaled it down. So I do have some experience with setting up a business, the legalities of it, the practicalities of it, etc. And now it's really exciting for me that I will be doing that here in Canada, and I feel like we're at the point where I have the energy, the capacity, the excitement to take that on, because so much since I moved here, I always knew that at some point I would start a business again. definitely didn't think it would be one with physical products, to be honest. That really is something that's very nerve-wracking for me, because that's very different to what I know, and it comes with its own unique challenges. But anyway, I am super excited to see and experience the differences. And then a little bit nervous, I'll admit. I think that this really feels very natural at the time where we are now and the phase of life that we're in. I also hold a master's degree in commerce, cum laude, with my thesis being the behaviors that made small business owners successful and what success means to them. So I have a lot of theoretical knowledge about small businesses, the challenges that they're faced. So I have like a lot of theoretical knowledge that I'm now also getting to put into practice for the second time. This is my second business I'm starting, but in an entirely new country. It feels good now. Again, like I said, we've been here 3 years. Life phases, time to like chat to people, get an understanding of like what my challenges are going to be here, like what are the things that are going to be easier for me here than in South Africa. Really get like an understanding of everything. And I've been speaking to a lot of sole proprietors and small business owners here, just like through like being here, and some of our friends do that. So it's feeling like the right time, and I'm very excited about it. I do need to take a break from filming this video, and I will be back shortly. All right, I'm back, and I apologize if the lighting isn't good. I can't see it right now. The sun is busy setting. But where was I? Right, I was talking about the small business that I am starting here. And one of the big differences between the business that I have in South Africa versus this one is that it is a physical product. Now, I never saw myself being somebody who would create or sell a physical product, especially coming from South Africa, where there's a very strong entrepreneurial culture. There's a very strong small business culture. There's a lot of competition for very well handmade things. There's a lot of it out there. And because of that, okay, I was able to access and have the things that we wanted, like the unique products we wanted, were pretty easy to find. And if they weren't easy to find, it was also pretty easy to find a way to source it, to get somebody else to make it and then to buy it. One of the examples, and like a main product that kind of pushed me to decide to like launch this and offer it to other people, is that I have been struggling to get boodschap here in Canada. And that's not because it's necessarily a South African soap. It's referred to like a homesteader soap, but it's just not easy to find. It exists, it's just not easy to find, and it's not as affordable as I'd like it to be. Whereas in South Africa, within a 10-minute drive of me, there were 4 different shops that sold 4 different boodschaps, like made by different companies, that I could access at very reasonable prices. So I never envisioned myself learning how to make it. Whereas here, I was like struggling. I was getting really tired of thinking like, oh, okay, I should buy it and send it to my sister so my mom can pick it up and then bring it to us. And eventually I just got fed up when my last attempt at sourcing it just like fell through. I was like, you know what, we're gonna make it. And I looked up how to make it, and we made it, and that's like in part what led to this. So boodschap, if you're not that familiar with it, like there's other versions how people make it, but the traditional one that I wanted is just tallow and lye. It's an incredibly basic soap that you can use on your body, and I use it as like a stain remover and a bunch of other things, and I love it. So I couldn't get it, I learned how to make it, and that is bringing me into a huge part of our lives here, is that I find my life here is so much more of a DIY kind of life than I had in South Africa. And I think in part it comes from the fact that it's often very expensive to pay somebody to do something for you, so you figure out a way to do it yourself. And I've been chatting to other people about this like DIY thought that I've been having of like how many skills I've learned since being here, which I did not bother to learn in South Africa. And it's not just, I'll talk about the ones that I learned, but it also extends to someone I was chatting to on Friday, was talking about how much they have learned to do in their home and appliances that they learned to fix and all sorts of things, because it's just so expensive often to pay somebody else to fix it unless it's like a really unique thing, it often makes sense for you to try to figure out how to do it yourself. So I've not done a lot of home type stuff. Maybe I'll venture into that if we own a home, but for right now, I've not done that. However, I did learn how to crochet. I learned how to sew because I wanted specific cloth diapers that I could not find here. And then I was gonna ship them from South Africa, but then I saw that they were also discontinued in South Africa actually. And I also was like, you know what? Let's just learn how to make it. So I learned how to make sourdough, which I didn't do in South Africa because there was an awesome sourdough bakery like right by our house. And I mentioned this in my last year video. I was making my first attempt at biltong last year this time, whereas now I have made biltong many times since then. And that is something I am able to purchase here, but it's like where I would have to purchase is a shop. I don't like frequent that part of the city as much. And also with us buying the half a cow, which I spoke about in my last video as well, and having that beef, it just makes sense to make it. And then also it made sense to learn to make vors and droevors in particular. So I bought that KitchenAid attachment that can make sausage as well. And it was like a bit of a learning curve because we got the amount wrong and we ended up making droevors until, sorry, lots of interruptions. We ended up making droevors until like 2 or 3 in the morning.
It's too scary to go sit.
Yeah.
It's too sunny.
It's too sunny. Do you want to sit this side of me? But long story short, we got some advice from other South Africans regarding the spices and things. I've also been bombarding my parents with messages about that, but also where to buy the casing, like the particularly thin casing for droevors. And that was awesome to learn how to make it because we had like so much mince to do something with, and I like to eat biltong and droevors frequently, so it's been great for us to be able to make it. Now that the weather is turning colder again, I'm gonna get back into making it more frequently. I took a bit of a break when it was quite hot because I don't know if it really makes a difference. I don't have a biltong box, I just have like a hanging structure, but also just for the warmer weather, we're spending a lot of time outside like I mentioned, and a few indoor things just took a back seat. And I love that just living here, it was a natural thing to make the biltong. I was chatting to my cousin the other day. He just went hunting in Kradok area and he shot some buck, which he was then having somebody else process, and like part of that processing he could just pick to have a bunch of it made into biltong and droevors, which is not an option I have here, but it's a product that I want to have. Anyway, that's just a difference, like a really big difference that I've noted from living here versus living in South Africa. Is just some things that I really want are just not as accessible to me here, and therefore I'm learning to make them. And that being said though, what I do love here is that the secondhand market is like really strong, and that is not something that I was big into in South Africa. A lot of what I had in South Africa was new things that I purchased, whereas here a huge hobby of mine is thrifting things and sourcing them secondhand. So one of the other DIY things that I did was I started thrifting wool sweaters and felting them and turning them into a fabric that I then used to sew some of our winter items with. Circle all the way back to what I was talking about with this new venture. And just by the way, if you do want to support me in any way, that is linked down below. It's scary and vulnerable to put oneself out there again and try something new, and it's just a really wonderful feeling when people support you in whichever way that they can. And I remember being very nervous about even the idea of starting something in Canada, because I remember when I started my business in South Africa, I found that people wanted to help me, and it was so wonderful. Like, people referred my services to their friends and to their family, and I felt very supported when I did that. And I didn't know if I would ever get to a point, like living here, whether I would feel that I didn't know, culturally speaking, whether that is part of something people do, and I didn't know whether I would establish the type of community that people also want to support you. So the more I do this, the more I'll be able to get a feel for that. But I just know that it feels really nice when you put yourself out there and you try something new and people are supportive in whichever shape or form they feels authentic and real for them to do. I used to love that this is a natural progression of life here. This was definitely not something that I planned or envisioned. I always just thought that once I start a business here in Canada, it's going to be very similar to what I had in South Africa. It's going to be a consulting type business. And I didn't see that happening anytime soon with where I'm at, like family responsibility wise, and taking all that on. So I love that this came as a natural progression of making things that I didn't think that I was going to make, and then of also where we are as a family and everything that we've been through these last 2 years. It feels like a really beautiful natural thing that's just come from all of that. Anyway, this was not a huge driving factor. I do want to bring it back to the finance talk that I started earlier. The financial aspect was not a driver necessarily behind this for a few reasons, as you can imagine and as I've explained, but the reality is also that like I'm a pretty financially averse, like risk averse person, and I like to keep expenses low. I like to not really stress about money. Our financial situation since our move has felt has felt a lot more volatile than I like, and it's not huge volatility like what other people may be comfortable with. You know, we have been able to make it work as a predominantly single income family, which honestly is pretty amazing in and of itself. We are able to cover our expenses, buy the health foods we want for the most part. Like, we live the life that we really want. It's not luxuriously flush, and we're not traveling the world. Not that that was on our to-do list anyway, but you get the point. It's like, for the most part, it is stable, but it's been more volatile than what I expected, given that we sort of had the savings, spent it to move here, started building it back up, then expenses rose again, and now we're kind of back into building up phase. And I'd kind of like it if it was just building that up and more stability than we've experienced these last 3 years. So I also touched on this in my last video. Last time I said I didn't know if we wanted to buy a house, and that's kind of shifted a little bit. We are happy right now renting, and it is serving us for just like everything that we've been through, where we're at as a family, you name it. We like the house we're in. We do not want to move again right now. If we can stay here for a few more years, that'd be awesome. We kind of in this last year came to the decision that we'd like to put it on our like medium-term plan to be able to buy a house, and to be able to buy a house in the neighborhood that we like and all of those things. This has not come from like a Keeping Up with the Joneses feel or anything like that. It's something that came from getting a sense of like really wanting to create our little space that works for us entirely, and you're able to make almost permanent changes to the place that you're living in that suits you and your family, which you're not able to do when you rent. So that is a new goal for us that we will be working towards in our medium-term future. So on the discussion of like planning, and I'm sort of just bouncing around here. Like I said, where we are with family right now, it does not make sense for me to go into the consulting work that I can do for South Africa. There is parts of my consulting that is universal to all countries. However, I'm not putting active effort into attempting to do consultations here in Canada just because of my family responsibilities and the way we've structured everything. But I do know that I will want to when I'm not a parent to littles anymore and when they don't need me as much. So what I've looked into there as part of our medium to long-term plan as well, I'm an employment relations practitioner, you probably know this by now, and a lot of what I do is around the employment relationship dynamic, negotiations, conflict, etc., which is universal to most countries, but there's an aspect of it that's like the labor law component, which was very specific to South Africa, and I found that it really complements what I do to have that knowledge. So I decided that I'm going to, what I looked into was there's a course that I can do, an employment relations / labor law course through a university here that's online. self-paced, and it will take me several years to finish, even if you're doing like all the courses, like every single, however often they run. But I will be spreading them out, so it will take me a bit of time. I'll start that soon-ish. I just want to finish our citizenship application and finish like the current small business stuff that I'm focusing on, but that's definitely something that I will start shortly in preparation for what I want to do when I don't have like little kitties anymore that are super dependent on me. And I'm also mentioning that because that's a thing for a lot of professionals, is just transferring their professional qualifications. Some people have to do it before they practice. For some people it can take time, or you can get some new ones, or whatever the case is. So in the case of Ian, he was a fully qualified actuary when we left South Africa. And for the most part, it was like transferred to here, but not entirely. There was like 2 avenues he could go with that. And he has done the avenue of getting the work experience, which he's now at the point where he's got enough work experience, so he just needs to finish up course and like one other thing, and then get qualifications here that's basically equivalent to the qualifications that he had in South Africa. Alright, so that's just on the professional front. Moving on from that to our expanded family front, I'm just going to briefly talk about this. It is quite nice that this is the second time that I'm doing this in Canada here, so I know how things work, and I from the get-go could contact and secure care with the midwife that I wanted, where in my pregnancy with Alba, I applied so late and there's a shortage that I was just all too grateful to get a midwife, whereas this time it feels really nice to have picked a specific midwife. I'm also at the same midwife clinic that I was previously, so going to my appointments and all of those things feels very familiar rather than this like completely brand new experience, because that time it was my first time like preparing for birth, let alone like midwives and appointments and all the things. Anyway, the other big thing that we have this time that we didn't have then, we have a support system that we didn't have last time. So last time for the birth, I did get a doula to assist with the birth for a variety of reasons, whereas this time I'm not going to be doing that, because I feel comfortable with our support system that we have here, and I've asked friends to help out. I'm having a planned home birth again, so it's quite nice that this is the second time that I'm doing all of these things and preparing all of it, and now we have much more of a support system. We're not busy moving countries. There's a lot more familiarity with it, so that's wonderful. I mean, of course, it's still an adjustment because now we have Alba, but having a lot of familiarity, which I did not have the first time, is nice. It's also, I have energy for other things because that aspect is not so new to me, and I don't really have to think about it much or put that much energy into it the way that I did the first time. And I just want to round off the end of the video with some more real talk. It's just like, how do we feel about living here 3 years into it? And we're back. It's been some challenges getting through this video, so thanks for bearing with me. Where we left off is that honestly there were a few times in the last year that I asked Ian whether he thought that we made the right decision to move here. It was particular in times of reflection of everything that we've gone through, all of the challenges that we faced, and reflecting on or considering how I thought they may have been different if we were back in South Africa instead of here. So as an example, when Ian got sick and he was not doing well, that was a huge challenge to face in a new country. It was a huge challenge to face here. And I wondered, for example, if we were back in South Africa, if that had happened there, firstly, would it have happened there? But had it have happened there, we would have had a lot more support, even something as basic as domestic support. Somebody to help clean the house, somebody to help with some food prep would have been very helpful. And I assume that I would have been able to continue to work in that time. I would have been able to outsource some of the household features. We would have also not been so isolated. It was quite a lonely time. Of course, like I explained, I deepened friendships and so much beauty came from it. but it was lonely in the sense that a lot of those friendships were still newish and they didn't know Ian before all of this happened. So their experience of our family was almost, it was like their first experience of our family was this. And I recognized that there were times where I had a longing for familiarity, of long-standing relationships, of people that have known us for a long period of time. And I really missed that a lot more this year than I did in the first 2 years. I can't say that this reflection was going on like while we were in the thick of things. I was just too busy focusing on like making the best of our situation and trying to support Ian in his healing and just deal with it. So that came a little bit after, which I think is why the reflection came this year and those questions came up for me this year. And I think it was also a few times when I was like really, really missing the ocean and swimming in some body of water that I would wonder about that. And then there's the obvious one, and there's just like no two ways about it. The winters here are really, really long, and we're figuring out how to thrive in them, not just survive through them. It's very easy to survive through them.
It came out.
But for me, it's about living our, funny anarchy, live our best life, live our healthiest life, not just like endure it, not spend most of our days just stuck indoors in front of a screen or something like that, is to really live our most wholesome life. And we're figuring that out. But of course, it is challenging with the fact that it's just so long. It's not that it's so cold. The super cold we can deal with is the fact that it's so long. Anyway, every time I'd asked Ian this, and I wondered, because of course he was the one going through the healing journey and the suffering and the pain. Although it impacted on our entire family, it was like mostly his burden to bear. Mostly his... Sure. Mostly his hardship. Okay. You're welcome. And I really appreciated that when I asked those questions. Of course, he assumed that there was something on my mind that day, so asked about that. And then would remind me not to romanticize what we think life would have been like. It is helpful, of course, to reflect on major life choices we made, like the choice to move here, and do we want to stay here, and is this what is best for our family? And of course it's important to reflect on that stuff, but it is not helpful for us to live in like a what if scenario, especially when we get to the point where we've been away so long that you really start to look back or picture things through like a little bit of a lens. Especially, for example, when things are expensive here, we would still price compare in our mind to what something cost when we left South Africa. Now that thing doesn't cost the same amount anymore. And yes, there are stuff that just is cheaper in South Africa, but they're not as cheap as we remember them to be. But sometimes we can forget that on the days where we're feeling a little grumpy about the challenges that we're facing on that day. And it was good reminders from Ian not to romanticize life through a little lens. So in particular, when I was like watching people's social media, and even in winter, they're sitting on the beach barefoot, and I'm like, wow. Because South Africa is so beautiful, right? It's like, it's so picturesque, and there's just so many wonderful things about it that of course I'm gonna look at that and be like, oh my gosh, I really miss that, and like how wonderful is that, and all of that. But then he also reminded me of overarching themes of why we left in the first place and what we wanted for our family. And I don't like to talk about this topic because it feels like such an obvious thing, but a huge part of us leaving was to feel safe. And because I'd had some incidences in South Africa that left me feeling very vulnerable, he reminded me of that, and how it is true for me that it is so worth a lot of the challenges that we face here for me on a day-to-day basis to feel safe when it's just me and Elba walking around our neighborhood, going places. I feel very secure. I feel very comfortable that I can focus on her and what we're doing, and not be so focused on my belongings and where they are and if they're okay and things like that. And I find that there's not that energy that's spent on having to have that awareness the whole time. So of course we do experience, like when we go hiking, the real awareness of wildlife here is like, you know, that's a real thing to consider, but that's different. It's when we're hiking in the mountains. Thank you. I'll eat it in a little bit, thanks. There's always going to be wonderful things about both places, and there's always going to be challenges about wherever we live, but as an overarching theme, we are happy that we made this choice for our family to be here, and for the most part life is wonderful, but of course we have like challenges like everybody, and we have days that are not the easiest, but that's just part of life, right? And each year and each season we are figuring out more and more how to live our best, most healthiest, most wholesome lives given the new set of circumstances we have. So be it stuff just with our family that we have wherever, or because of where we live and the challenges that we face in that regard. And maybe we'll learn to snowshoe this year. We'll see. So we're happy living here. It's been a good 3 years. It came with some challenges and some growth and some wonderful things and all of that. And I am excited to see what the next year brings for us. Thanks so much for being with me today.